The nurse couldn't say it, but her eyes told me a different story, which reflected a thankfulness for my mom being so proactive in curbing the bully. One night, Mom was tired, but it wasn't her turn to be put to bed. When they went to look for her, she was nowhere to be found. After a room-to-room check, they found her in someone else's bed. For a woman who supposedly could not walk, that was quite a feat. And they asked her why she was in somebody else's bed, and she simply said, "I was tired and I didn't want to wait." More trouble for Millie, and her activity became more restricted. Every time I heard stories like this, I was kind of like Mom's silent cheerleader and proud that she had so much gumption. In the meantime, she was getting locked down more and more in her wheelchair. But that's when I knew I had to find a way to bring her home. That took a year to plan and to have the home altered to accommodate both my mother and a caregiver. My mother loved coming to church. She lit up like a Christmas tree when I picked her up at the manor on Sunday mornings. And you loved her just as she was. Sometimes that meant hearing her talk in church. Those were fear-gripping moments for me, because occasionally she was so bad that we had to take her out. One of her classic lines was saying, "Who is that man speaking?" Or she would turn around and she'd look at everybody and then she'd say, do you know how many people are here? And then one day after she woke up from a mini nap, she simply said, "General Motors." I wondered if the next sentence would include a stock tip or something about a car that she wanted to buy. Her dementia was often quite entertaining. Her signature furry coat that's down here has its own story. You know, a woman who's lived in Florida for many years doesn't have a winter coat. So I loaded her up in her wheelchair and headed to the mall. Since it was hard for her to get up and down, I did all the modeling. So I planned to get her a nice down coat, but after trying on about 30 of them and no response from her, I was getting a little weary. So just for the silliness of it, I pulled out a faux fur and almost laughing, and I put it on and I did a little twirl and I said, "How do you like this?" She said, "I like it." So at that point I ran to the cash register just thrilled that this event was over, and she loved that coat. Bringing Mom home required a 24/7 caregiver so that I could still work. My continual prayer request was that the Lord would send a godly woman to come and take care of my mom and love her as they would their own mother. The first day that I picked up Sophia on the bus, I was sure that the Lord had answered that prayer. We almost immediately became like sisters, and I'm so grateful that the Lord brought her to my home. She has helped me grow as a Christian and as a person. I also want to thank Evelyn, who also has such a heart for my mother. I've gained a new appreciation for just how hard this work is, and the caregivers have to be called to do what they do. As a client declines, the work increases a lot. Love always comes at a cost, so losing a client means a loss for them too. Thankfully, the cost of this love is completely worth the sacrifice given, and the benefits are a treasure that cannot be bought with anything this world has to offer. It was a Friday in March when the house addition was finished. On Saturday morning, an army of beautiful women came to my home with buckets and mops and cleaned my house from top to bottom, getting it ready for my mother. Your cheerful, generous hearts stir me to become more like you, and I'll never be able to express how much you blessed me by doing this. Thank you to every man that came and fixed something in my house and painted or helped bring in an impossibly heavy hospital bed. To everyone that lifted my mom in and out of the car and held doors for us, or lifted Mom up and down your steps so that we could have a meal at your home. Thanks to everyone who stopped and spoke to my mother, even when she could say very little. Even if you never talked with my mom but prayed for her from afar, I thank you. Thank you, Donna Daniels, for becoming my mom's beautiful companion while she was at Collingswood Manor. Thank you to every hospice aide and nurse and other aide who came to my house almost daily for 3 years. Lastly, I thank the Lord. His presence in my home over the last 3 years has been completely overwhelming. He gave me the most beautiful ending with my mom, which I'll never forget. Sophia and I had anointed her with oil and prayed for her, and we had done that many times before. But this time we knew it was different, and Mom was leaving soon. We took a short break, and then I returned to hold Mom's hand. Her eyes opened, and she just looked at me with such a look of love. God gave me that moment to tell her how much I loved her, how beautiful she was, how thankful I was to have her as a mother, and that everything would be okay. She closed her eyes, and I started singing her favorite hymns. And when I get to the line that says, "When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home," that's when Mom's breathing completely slowed down. And within a couple of minutes, she took her last few peaceful breaths and went into the arms of Jesus. There's nothing in this world that ever can replace the value of this experience. Soli Deo Gloria. To him alone be the glory. I think Donna's going to come.
I met Millie in a different season of life than her children. She was starting to dim. However, she was still a bright star, and I was able to spend some really nice time with her. I met her at Collingswood Manor. I was available during the day, and Millie was just kind of stagnant. And we started with our outings, and Millie totally picked up and changed. So I was able to talk with Millie and get to know her a little bit and find out what she liked to do. And one of the things she loved was golf. So I was able to almost daily for a while, well, maybe a couple times a week, take her out and just give her a big long walk around Knights Park. And Millie would just change her demeanor from being sleepy and in a wheelchair, as long as I kept her warm, or else she would protest, was such that she would notice everything, the robins, the squirrels, the houses, the flowers. We would talk about the seasons. And I just learned so much from her. I learned that she did grow up on a farm. I learned that they had horses. I learned that she was, I think, the oldest, wasn't she? In her family, she got to drive. It was amazing because imagine what she has seen in her life. When they got the first telephone, when she started working and she met her husband, who she did adore. She just would always say what a great man he was. How she had to leave work because at that time in the economy of the United States, only one person could really work at that point. She loved golf and she loved dancing. And she would always tell me that she wanted a boyfriend. And she really didn't want a boyfriend. What she wanted was a dance partner. And that's what she missed so much. And she would tell me not too old because she wanted him to be able to dance with her. So one of the things I did was I would read her the weekly newsletter. And right after Christmas, they were going to have the snowflake dance. And I really didn't know. But I started talking to her about it, and I got Lois's permission, and I took her to the snowball dance, or snowflake dance. And the people in Collingswood Manor were just amazing at being able to create a great activity, event feeling for their residents. And everybody got involved. The kitchen guys did performances, and this is not just that time, but anyway, there were so many neat things. And when I would take her, she would change, her feet would start tapping. And this one snowball dance, there was a man who actually ran the kitchen, and everybody got dressed up in tuxedos and dresses. This is the staff, not us. And he was able to pick her up out of her wheelchair and actually dance with her. And we had a picture, I'm sorry I didn't bring it, where she looked like a different person, didn't she, Lois? She really, just had such a good time. And what I learned was, before I say that, what I learned was, really what is in us comes out. Millie had an attitude of gratefulness. She was always just truly sweet and generous and thankful for every little thing. And what I learned was I really hope that I can be like her in a sense that, God's love comes out of us, and I never saw her be cross or uncomfortable or never complain, and it was just a real testimony to who she was. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sophia, and before I start, give you a little testimony about Mildred. At the end of Mildred's day, the Lord gave me a word. Zechariah chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. Moreover, the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, the hand of Zerubbabel hath laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it. And what came in mind was, the God who begins a good work always brings it to a good completion. I met Mildred when Mildred had to come to her daughter Lois's house. And I was the caregiver who came to begin with her to get her comfortable. So along the line, God who knows all things and work all things together for those that love and trust in Him, one way or the other, I had to leave Mildred for one reason. But a God who, because Lois prayed and said, I needed a caregiver, a godly woman, the God who brought me to begin with her, at one point, 2 months before Mildred went to be with the Lord, within 3 months, I kept telling her, I said, Mildred, I said, Lois, I'm tired with the job that I'm doing. I feel like it's time for me to leave. You know, when God is speaking, sometimes you can't make sense out of it. But you feel the unction that it's time for you to leave. So I had to leave my job. And then my daughter went to Africa for 3 years, Arlene, and she had come back, and I thought that was the time that I needed to go and spend time with my daughter. Little did I know that God had a different plan. I don't know what that was. Mildred was praying and said, where is that little loud girl? So as I left the job, I couldn't make sense out of it, but I knew that I was making the right decision at one point. So somebody called me for a job for a month. And then within the month, we kept talking, and Lois said, would you like to come take care of my mother? I said, really? I said, I thought this was my last time. So I said, let's pray about it, because if it's the will of God, it will be. So as we went on, to make the story short, it came to a point, and I felt within my heart that I needed to come back. It was very hard because Mildred had a very good caregiver. And I didn't want to feel like I was taking somebody's job. But within my heart also, I felt it was the right thing. So Lois had to do whatever discussion she had to have with Evelyn for me to come in. And if we hear about all the testimonies, Mildred lived a fulfilled life. And me coming in the picture confirms that I had to come and fulfill my assignment. It was the best thing that God could ever give me. It has taught me how meaningful my job has been. I thought it was the end of it, but Mildred, coming back to Mildred, just said, no, you're not done. There's more people out there who needs a good caregiver like you to help them. So one thing that I want to share with everybody in this room, I'm a girl from Africa. I came to this land. My mother had me when she was 15 years. And my grandmother took me in, so I grew up to be a granddaughter, a grandmother's baby. That was what connected me with taking care of elderly people. So I did this job in honor of my grandmother. But as I see Mildred go be with the Lord, I thought it was only my grandmother, but little did I know that it was more of Mildred than my grandmother. So Mildred brought me to a family. I have felt so much love. Thank you, Warren. Having the opportunity to be in this church. Never a day would I have walked out of this church and never had not added something to my life. It has taught me how to trust God more. It has taught me how to, this church, I have known God for working with the Lord for 13 years, but the last 3 years has really revealed my potential, the potential of my calling, the purpose of my calling. And Mildred has been the one who has really defined my life and said, young woman from Africa, your job is not done. You have more to do. So thank you, the Hassel family. I feel so good to be here at this moment, having a privilege to serve a woman like Mildred. Every story that has been shared among all of us, with me, it has confirmed everything. I had a very good time. I was very loud. Every morning when I come in, I say, yeah, Millie, 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 Millie. She looked at me and said, what? I said, Mildred, it's time to get up. Every bit of my moment with Mildred, there was hard times, but I enjoyed every moment because she was very appreciative. The last 2 months, Mildred would look at me and say, thank you. Even though she couldn't say much, her thank you was always there. I loved Mildred and Mildred loved me. Thank you so much. It was a privilege. Amen.
Is there anybody else that would like to share? You can do that briefly if you'd like to go up, so we'll give it a moment. And if not, then I think I'll say one more thing. This is all said here. Paul said about facilitating the issue of qualification. I want publicly to thank those for bringing my home into a home that they also done to take such good care of the last few years. I think it was really, and your church for accepting her and taking such good care of all the people here who came over and cleaned the house and did all these other things. Thank you very much.
Many of you go to church know that I have Down syndrome son who is 4 years old, right? And Brian loved her. He looked for her when she came, and he would pat her hand and talk to her. And one of his biggest memories of her was we were out to eat lunch one time, and she accidentally started drinking his iced tea. And to this day, he still talks about how Mildred drank his iced tea. But she was such a fine lady. Elegant is the word that comes to mind because she was regal even to the very end. She was dressed so beautifully. She just had these sweet curves and beautiful. And there were times when I thought, Lois, what are you doing? All of this work to bring her home at such an old age, but it was God, and it was your heart, and it was what she needed, and you are to be presented to what you did to her. That was just beautiful, and thank God for that.
Gary?
So,
Yeah. Jennifer was supposed to play today, and we pray for her because she's very, very ill. So this was one of my dad's favorite pieces he loved to play. So we've got to plug into YouTube.
feel like you should clap. It really would mean a lot to her. It's an honor to be here and share with you a little bit. And as I was looking over the funeral program, at my mother's funeral, we sang Amazing Grace. My dad's favorite song was In the Garden, which we sang at his funeral. And my brother's a violinist. So, you get emotional in these things, don't you? Mildred lived quite a life, a full life. Sounds like Gary just having to lose a son made it a full life. So she had a very full life, and if I add it up right or subtract it right, it's 101 years old, which is pretty remarkable. Folks, that's a lot of living. If you think about 101, that's a lot of American history. I start to think through, and I think, okay, that's living through 2 world wars, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, war in the Gulf, war against Iran. I mean, that's a lot of wars that are involved in that. The Depression she lived through. She made it through the 60s, so she survived that. And you think about what happened in civil rights and how the country changed just in our social fabric. And then think about technology that she saw change. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, from probably no phones to, the cell phones, I mean, all where we are today. That's a lot of life. There's a lot that she observed. You just wonder, like, what kind of more stories would you want to hear, from that perspective, someone who saw all of that take place. And then how you interact with all of that personally. She was, as you heard, actively involved in her local church for decades and served in her community as well, consistently. Here's the most important thing about Mildred. She had faith in Jesus Christ as her Savior. Okay, that's the most important thing. Of all the identity points, that being what, by all accounts, would be a wonderful woman, right? A great mom, a faithful wife, and a joyful wife. It sounds, would have loved to have seen their marriage. I mean, you hear 63 years. I love being at weddings.